Hey, if you're going to Too Many Games, I'm going to have a panel at Saturday at 8 p.m. at Panel Room 1. Hope to see you there.
Go! Yahoo! Hello, 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 banana! Super Monkey Ball!
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Boundary Break, a show where we basically take the camera anywhere we want to try to find secrets and new discoveries to some of our favorite games. She says, you may ask, how the heck did you get an episode out this early for Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania? Well, believe it or not, I have Sega to thank for that. The first AAA company to approach me and say, hey, can you break our game? And I am more than happy to oblige. Thank you so much for being an awesome company, Sega. Also want to thank Jade and Codename Gamma for making this camera. Without the two of them, I would never have been able to get this episode out so early, so thank you to both of you. With that said, let's take a look at Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania, as well as compare some shots with the original Super Monkey Ball 1 and 2. Alright, so first thing I want to talk about is the bubbly washing machine. Now this location is a heavily inspired Japanese area, and there's all sorts of neat stuff like shirts with prints of ai, as well as a hot spring bath. But I want to talk about this level first because in contrast, there's a lot more different to this than there is in the original game. It seems as though nothing was reused, not a single texture or anything. And some of the first things I want to mention here, on the washing machine for the remake version, there are two 3-leaf clovers printed onto the machine. And going inside the machine will show you that it's not modeled on the inside, but there is a water texture stored underneath. And this isn't the only dev quad that we'll be looking at today. Now, in contrast to that, the washing machine in the original game is much different, featuring a sticker that says Super Duper AV Electric, a reference to the company that made the game. The inside of the washing machine is fully modeled. There's also a box of Super Cleanser Monkey Shine hidden behind the washing machine. This is not something that's in the remake. Another thing that's not in the remake is this teeny tiny little rubber duck that's stored way outside the boundaries here, as well as extra details like the wicker basket and those stack of tubs over to the right. The level also features a pagoda all the way off in the distance, and the clothes on the clothing line are completely different. Moving on to our next world environment, this is the remake version yet again. I'll always try to start each stage that we look at with the remake. And there's lots of cool stuff. For example, at the top of this dark cliff is a haunted mansion with moving lava that goes all the way up to it. And now in the original game, that mansion is there, but it's textured a little bit differently. The trail up to the mansion also isn't all lava. It's originally a dirt path. There are also signs in the original game that weren't used in the remake. This one says Monkey Treasure and then Shopping Town. And then this one says Shopping Town and Monkey Treasure, which would mean that the entire circle is just two areas. And as you'll see here, as you go over to the next sign, it says Mimi's Castle and once again Shopping Town. And also there's one last sign that says Shopping Town. I guess there's no shortage of shopping areas for this place. Also, unlike the remake, the modelers for the original game seem to have modeled the interiors for the Ferris wheel. And now let's take a look at a Monkey Ball 1 stage, and in this one particular case I want to show you the original version first, because this is fascinating stuff. So for the underwater environment, there's a submarine that circles the entire thing, and on it there's a Dole logo as well as the AV logo on the tail. And if you look really closely at the windows, you'll see that Ai's inside with his hands clapped, and then a good look of the interior without a monkey facing inside of it. Now switching over to the remake, they had to get rid of anything that mentioned Dole or AV, but you can see that they used the original textures of Ai and the submarine interior, meaning that the developers did have access to the original textures, and I do think that you'll see as we go along here that they at least use them as a reference from time to time, but very, very rarely you're going to find that the developers actually used them. And here's one of very few examples of that. Now as for the Dole logo, I noticed something really interesting. In the level select screen, you can see a beta element which features a shooting star on the submarine. Going into the stage though, you can see that they removed the star. Now that would be interesting enough, but if you look very, very closely, you can see that it was clearly an executive order, because instead of just removing it outright, the developers seem to have replaced the texture by just adding in a camouflaged orange texture that would just blend in with the submarine itself. You can see the separation of the texture where the shooting star would be, and then the model of the submarine. Now back to Super Monkey Ball 2, here with the remake. There's a lot of cool things to look at. Most of it's just really well well executed environment with nothing to really talk about that's out of bounds. But this dragon here does have something to discuss. First off, the arm that is shown here seems to be textured improperly, but it's very hard to notice because the untextured part blends in with the same color as the statue itself. And then taking the camera underneath the lava, you can see that the modelers probably modeled an entire dragon and then removed pieces of the dragon to save on resources, but there's a lot more leg here than you would imagine. Meanwhile, in the original game here, you can see that the remake was good enough to remove the left arm just the same as it was in the original, and then taking the camera underneath the lava in this version can show you that the modeler did nothing to model the dragon outside of what you can see above the lava, really. And then baboon base, oh boy. Alright, so first let's take a look at a couple things. One, we got batteries here that are not labeled as batteries. We have exposed computer boards here, and there's some unique imagery like a planet with some radio signals coming out, as well as a star and silhouettes of bananas. Taking the camera outside can also show you that there's an entire planet out here. Well, not an entire planet necessarily, just enough so that the player can still get the illusion of it, but by panning the camera out, you can see that there's only a small portion of a planet that's actually modeled, as well as a dark blue texture to either represent some atmosphere or space itself. However, the original game is nuts. There are references to the AV company all over this map. Even one portion is going as far to say Amusement Vision and then a website domain. You can also see the Sega logo on some circuit boards, as well as Amusement Vision's company name and logos on transistors and everything in between. The most interesting thing here are these little doodads that seem to have words written out on them. And although it's really blurry, it's speculated on Twitter, which, by the way, if you want previews for upcoming episodes, definitely follow me on there. Well, anyways, my community managed to figure out that these are all single malt liquor brands. If you go down the list, it says single malt whiskey, Glenlivet, Trath Isla, Keola, and Lagavulin. Oh yeah, and the batteries say battery. And then, oh boy, you're in for a treat here. So this is the factory stage in Banana Mania, and you'll see that these boxes go on a conveyor belt and then go into this storage area, never to be seen again. Well, let me show you something pretty cool. Taking the camera inside the building will show you that that box gets rocketed all the way to the back of the building, only to restart the cycle that the player gets to see for these boxes. So essentially, it's the same small handful of boxes being reused over and over again for this animation cycle. But far better than that is taking the camera outside of the factory to show you an entire city. It's pretty nuts. Now, there's a lot of detail here, a lot of unique buildings, as well as one building that's not even textured properly. See, it's the same texture, but the idea is that one texture is supposed to be mirrored on the other side of the other to make one giant window and one giant door. However, they're both facing the same direction, so the illusion is broken. But before we move on to the remake, I want you to look at this bridge here, as it appears to have a carving of a human character on the side of it. Now, this is where I want to transition to the original one, because I thought for sure this was a reused texture, but instead, now I'm starting to speculate that it was used as a reference. As you can see that there are subtle differences between the two versions. Also, you'll see that the textures for this building were placed properly, now giving you an idea of what that would actually look like without the error. And back to a Super Monkey Ball 1 stage, you can see very faintly off in the distance that there are penguins, and taking the camera up to them can show you that they are low poly models but have unique designs on them and also have fully modeled bow ties. Now, the penguins used in the original version are nearly identical as far as I can tell. This might be another one of the very rare instances where it's the same exact texture, if not only slightly modified when used for the remake. Now, this one's pretty awesome. We're inside of a whale this time in Super Monkey Ball 2, and once again we're looking at the remake to start with. And inside this whale there are biodomes hanging from the top of its stomach. Taking the camera inside can show you a good look at these buildings, which have a lot of detail to them. Also, at the bottom of the stomach are dilapidated cities with streets and buildings. But taking the camera very close down there can show you all sorts of cars that the player normally doesn't get such a good look at. So from what I've seen, there's only 3 different car models, which include a truck, a standard sports car, and an ambulance. Now, going over to the original game, it looks nearly identical, and again, the cars are almost exactly the same. So what I would rather focus on is taking the camera inside of the biodomes, so you can get a nice good look at that before we move on to what I think is one of the coolest shots in this whole episode. Going back to the remake again, let's do a zoom out of the entire whale, which, by the way, its mouth moves in this version, allowing us to see the ocean outside of its mouth. And now I want to give you a close look at this bizarre stage in Super Monkey Ball 1. Now, I say bizarre because there's these statues all here that just look very unique from one another, and it seems to imply to me that these were probably boss designs that just weren't used in the game. I guess that's very speculative, but they look like bosses. Each one of them looks like a unique boss that would be in a game like Monkey Ball. And in case you were wondering, they look identical in the remake. The only difference that I can find is that the tattered cloths to this pumpkin guy seems to lack transparency, and the skeleton with a sword seems to be removed entirely. Now here's the underwater stage in Monkey Ball 2. This is Banana Mania's version, and way out of bounds there's another unused quad. I'm starting to think that these are used as a reference for effects that are placed over existing textures. Anyways, this remake version uses a whole bunch of small fish, but as far as I could see, the original version only had one giant fish, with its fin clipping into the boundaries, and taking the camera inside of its body can show you some fish meat. I don't know why that's the case, but here you go. Speaking of taking the camera inside of things, let's take a look inside of some of the character models. One of the techniques I noticed that was used here in Banana Mania that is not used in the original games is that they store the blinking textures inside the head, and whenever your character blinks, that texture is then pulled to the front of the eyes. Obviously, characters that don't blink like Beat do not have this feature, but also interesting thing about Beat is that if you take the camera inside of his goggles, you can see that his face is fully modeled. He just doesn't have any eyes. Now, some longtime fans as well as developer enthusiasts might be saying, who would ever go for the trouble of drawing a face underneath his goggles if no one's ever going to see it? Which honestly, I hope to God that's exactly what you said, because now we're going to take a look at a Jet Set Radio Future model of Beat and show you that behind his goggles in that game, he had one eye that was made completely, and then the other eye just looks like a doodle. But still, with the one complete eye, you can now have an idea of what Beat's face would actually look like. And also, since Beat's character model never opens his mouth for anything, he also has an unused mouth interior. Anyways, let's do another zoom out. This one's pretty incredible because you're the size of a bubble in a boiling pot. And as you keep panning the camera outward, you can see that boiling pot is a very small prop to a very big area. Now check this out, this is the billiards mini game in Banana Mania, and the aesthetic here is much different. It's kind of like a casino with ornate furniture, as well as all the characters being featured. However, in Super Monkey Ball 2, oh boy, it's a completely different story, and there is a lot to look at here. First, it's got a Wild West motif, with your billiard table inside of a saloon it looks like, and there's this piece of paper hung up here with illegible writing, but it does say Super Monkey Ball 2 at the top, as well as a picture of Ai with a shirt that's unused in the game that looks like it says I Heart MB Monkey Ball. And there's also the initials of SMB Super Monkey Ball. Taking the camera outside the saloon can show you all the different buildings that are on the outside that you can barely get a chance to see. One says Sarudama, another one says Banana. This building has a very tiny sign way off in the distance that says Specials with banana milk, strawberry milk, and II Special. Zooming the camera out can also show you that there's another building called the Banana Bar. Also, there's a jukebox over here with a wanted poster right next to it that has a sinister looking II that has a bounty for 877 million bananas. And then next to that is a tiny little scribble note that once again has the initials for Super Monkey Ball, followed by a doodle of a ball plus bananas plus a monkey. Anyways, that's the end of the episode. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you come to Too Many Games and you see my panel. We're going to have a blast. So I know that not all of you can go, but for those that are, I hope you show up. It's going to be Saturday at 8 p.m. and that'll be in panel room 1. If you're a fan of Boundary Break and you want to keep the show going, don't forget there's a Patreon page. I got a link to it in the video description. I could always use your support in case there's a bad month. But with all that said, thank you so much for watching, and we're going to keep the ball rolling and get lots of content out. So stay tuned for what probably will be a Dead by Daylight Part 2 episode coming up next. Take care.